Chapter 18. The Arithmetic of Souls. The lie was a stone in his gut. It sat there, cold and heavy, as Rook went through the motions of survival. He helped patch a leaking air conduit in the hydroponics bay, the sharp smell of sealant and wet soil filling his helmet. He listened to Risha, the doer, explain with feverish hope how the first generation of genetically modified lichen was showing promising adhesion to the regolith samples. He ate his allotted portion of algae paste, tasting nothing. All the while, the truth screamed silently inside him. 99.7% probability of total systemic collapse. The words were a pulse in time with his heartbeat. The inner worlds, Earth, Mars, the belt, gone dark. Not destroyed, but simplified, stripped back. The high-tech utopia, the mug, the Aegis, all reduced to static, to base components, to screaming metal and biological survival. His mind, scarred by the silent spring, could imagine it with horrifying clarity. Cities not in ruins, but in a kind of technological senility. Machines dead, networks silent. Millions, billions, thrown back into a pre-digital age overnight, facing starvation, chaos, and the slow, cold death of a civilization amputated from its life support systems. And they had done it. Their exodus, their desperate flight had been the catalyst. The resonance pulse, meant to propel the novum aevum, had instead been a scythe swung back toward the heart of humanity. They hadn't escaped the correction. They had become its unwitting broadcast antenna. He watched the survivors. The young mother, Ilara, trying to soothe her coughing child with a ration of precious water. The old engineer, Hendrix, whose hands shook as he soldered a connection, his lifetime of knowledge now dedicated to keeping a single light bulb lit. They fought for tomorrow with a faith that made his lie feel like a betrayal of cosmic proportions. But what was the alternative? To stand in the crowded, chilly mess hall and say, "The struggle is pointless. Everything you knew is gone. We are not pioneers. We are the last flicker of a candle that already set the house on fire." Vance would ask for proof. He had the crypt, but its data was keyed to his neural signature. He could show her a warm, black rock that meant nothing. His word, the word of the traumatized rememberer, against the desperate need to believe. He saw Soren Karr moving through the HAB module. The man no longer just held quiet meetings. He worked. He was in the recycling plant, learning the systems. He was in the hydroponics bay, asking intelligent questions. He was building credibility, demonstrating that his hard logic came with calloused hands. His daughter, Liana, followed him sometimes, a silent, wide-eyed shadow. Karr's argument was being etched not in words, but in the visible gauntness of her face. The tension was a slow freeze, creeping up from the rock into their bones. The crisis arrived not with a shout, but with a hiss. It was in the middle of the dim, artificial night cycle. A piercing, sustained alarm shrieked through the HAB module, the pressure loss alarm from Subsector 4, the workshop and primary machine shop. Rook was on his feet, pulling on his suit before the general alert finished sounding. He met Hayes and a team of watchers at the airlock. Vance's voice crackled over the suit comms, tight with control. "Breach in Sub 4. Source unknown. Sensor shows a linear tear, 2 meters in length. Atmosphere venting rapidly. Sealant teams, go." They cycled through. Sub 4 was a scene of frantic, silent chaos in the weightless dark. Tools, metal stock, and fragments of ice spun in the howling gale of escaping air, pulled toward a jagged, glittering smile torn in the outer hull. The breach wasn't an impact crater. It was a clean, vicious cut, as if made by a monstrous blade. Hayes's voice was grim. "That's no micrometeorite. That's a stress fracture. The old girl's finally coming apart." They waded in, fighting the torrent. Rook and 2 others wrestled a prefab sealant panel, a slab of plasti-ceramic and foam, toward the tear. The wind tried to tear it from their hands. As they slammed it into place, the emergency bolts firing to secure it, Rook's helmet light swept the area. His breath caught. Amidst the swirling debris, near the base of the primary fabricator, was a tool, a plasma cutter. Its tip was still glowing a faint, cherry red. It had been used recently, and it had been left, unsecured, near a critical support strut that showed signs of heat scoring. The fracture hadn't been an accident. It had been induced. The sealant panel held with a final shuddering groan. The wind died. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the team's ragged breathing. Breach contained, Hayes reported. Atmospheric loss at 18%. Stabilizing. Back in the pressurized hub, with helmets off, the mood was bleak. The workshop was their manufacturing heart. Its damage was a blow to their future capacity. Vance listened to the report, her face a mask of stone. When Hayes finished, she asked, "Cause?" Hayes glanced at Rook, then down at the data slate. Initial analysis suggests a pre-existing flaw in the hull plating, exacerbated by thermal stress from nearby activity. Karr, who had joined the gathering, stepped forward. His face was smudged with grease. He'd been helping in the machine shop earlier. "What kind of activity, Lieutenant?" Hayes hesitated. "The fracture origin point is adjacent to support strut Beta 7. Scans show recent localized heat signatures on the strut, consistent with tool use." "A tool left running? A terrible accident in the chaos," a talker offered too quickly. Rook spoke, his voice flat. "The plasma cutter I found was at Station 3. Its work register shows it was activated for a 4.2-minute cycle, ending approximately 7 minutes before the breach alarm. Its safety limiter was manually overridden." The room went very still. An accident was one thing, a deliberate override was another. "Who was on the work roster for Sub-4 in the last 2 hours?" Vance asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Hayes called up the log. "Engineer Risha, Apprentice Jax, and Soren Karr." All eyes turned to Karr. He didn't flinch. He spread his hands, a gesture of weary honesty. "I was there. I was modifying a mounting bracket for the new water reclaimer. I used the cutter. I shut it down and stowed it properly. I have witnesses. Risha was across the bay calibrating the lathe. Jax was fetching supplies." Risha, her arms crossed, nodded tersely. "He's right. I saw him stow his tools. The cutter at Station 3 wasn't his. Then who the hell was using it?" Hayes demanded. "Perhaps," Karr said, his gaze sliding toward Rook. "Someone who moves through here often, unseen. Someone with a unique understanding of pressure points and structural flaws. Someone who might believe that a more immediate, acute crisis would unite us, or force a difficult decision." The implication hung in the air, thicker than the lingering smell of sealant. The rememberer. The ghost. Rook felt a cold fury, clean and sharp. Karr was good. He was turning the mystery back on the one person whose history made him a plausible agent of chaos. Vance's eyes locked with Rook's. He saw the question in them, and the fear. Not fear that he did it, but fear of what this accusation would do. "No one is making accusations," she said, her tone final. "The investigation continues, but this changes our calculus. We have an active threat, either from a structural weakness we don't understand, or from within." She looked at the assembled faces, the fear and suspicion now naked in their eyes. "Watcher shifts are doubled. All tool use requires a double check and log off with Hayes, everyone." As the group dispersed, muttering, Karr approached Vance. "Commander, a word. This threat from within. It underscores my point. We are fragile. Our margins are gone. An act of sabotage, or even a simple accident, could collapse life support for a whole sector. We can no longer afford to carry passive weight. Every resource drain is a vulnerability. Every non-contributor is a risk." He wasn't talking about saboteurs anymore. He was talking about Leah, about the broken. The breach had given his arithmetic of souls a new, terrifying urgency. Vance's reply was low, for him alone, but Rook, lingering nearby, heard it. "Your contribution metric is flawed, Soren. Stability isn't just about calorie output. It's about what we're stable for. If the price of survival is becoming people who look at a wounded neighbor and see a risk to be mitigated, then we've already lost what we're trying to save." "And if the price of your morality is my daughter's life?" Karr asked, no anger, just a devastating quiet. "Which calculus do you want on her tombstone? She died because we were good, or she lived because we were smart?" He walked away, leaving Vance standing alone, the weight of his unanswerable question bending her shoulders. Rook found Leah in her usual corner. She was not catatonic. She was drawing. With a stolen piece of conductive carbon and a sheet of scrap polymer, she was sketching. The lines were shaky, chaotic, but the emerging shape was unmistakable. The swirling geometric horror of the Romulus lattice, but rendered with a strange, delicate beauty. "She remembers," a soft voice said. It was the botanist purist, Anya. She stood nearby, tending a makeshift terrarium of moss. Not with her mind, with her hands, her soul. "Does she speak?" Rook asked. "Not words. Sometimes sounds, humming. It's unsettling, but it's noise." Anya looked at him. "They want to list her for the lottery, you know. Karr's people. They call it resource reallocation. They've drawn up criteria: neural activity, caloric intake, projected utility." Rook's fist clenched. The lie in his gut twisted. They were fighting over scraps on a dying rock while the universe of their birth lay in ruins. The hypocrisy was suffocating. "He didn't sabotage the hull," Rook said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Anya looked at him, her eyes old and sad. "Does it matter? The fracture is real. The fear is real. Truth is what people act upon, Kalen, not what is." That night, in the oppressive, breath-fogged dark of the HAB module, the whispers became a plan. Rook, lying on his pallet, heard them. Karr and a small group of talkers and watchers, speaking in hushed tones near the water reclaimer. "Not violence, consensus. We present the list, a voluntary petition. Those who see the logic will sign. When over 50% of productive contributors agree, she will have to put it to the vote. Begin with the catatonics. It's merciful. Then the chronically injured. Hendricks, his tremors mean he ruins more parts than he makes. A community duty, to give one's place for the future." It was cold, clean, and monstrous. It was the Aegis' logic, stripped of its godlike scale and placed in the hands of desperate, hungry men. It was the correction, in human form. Rook knew then that he could not remain silent. The truth he carried was a weapon, but perhaps the only weapon big enough to shatter Karr's insidious, logical evil. To show them that their petty arithmetic was happening on the deck of a universe-sized ship that had already sunk. But how? The crypt was useless to them. He needed proof they could see. An idea, desperate and terrifying, formed. It came from Leah's humming, from the phantom pain in his skull, from the memory of the core's death throes. The resonance pulse had been a psychic phenomenon as much as a physical one. It had left a scar on space-time, and his mind was tuned to it. What if he could show them, not with data, with a vision, a shared psychic echo of the dying scream of Earth? He had the scar. He had the crypt's data imprinted on his soul. And in the neural nexus, when he had woven silence, he had learned to project. It would risk his mind. It could shatter theirs. It might drive the broken permanently mad. But the alternative was to watch them slowly, logically, decide to eat their own. He waited until the deep night cycle, when even the whispers slept. He took the black data crypt from its hiding place. He went to the one place with enough open space, enough emotional resonance, and enough connection to the rock itself. The command nook with the frozen bodies. He placed the crypt on the dead console. He put his hands on it, and on the cold, petrified hand of the long-dead officer beside him. He closed his eyes. He didn't try to broadcast the data. He focused on the feeling. The vast, silent snap of 1,000 networks failing. The panic of billions, suddenly alone in the dark. The cold settling into the bones of mighty cities. The quiet, desperate hunger that would now be the song of Earth. He poured into it his own grief, his own guilt, the crushing weight of the lie. He used his perception not as a sense, but as a trumpet. And he blew a single devastating note. The silent scream ripped out of him. Across Wayfinder Outpost, 115 people awoke at the same instant. They didn't hear a sound. They felt a dying, a great distant pain, a loss so profound it was like a limb of the soul being severed. Children cried out. Adults sat bolt upright, clutching their chests. Leah, in her corner, began to wail, a raw, wordless sound of absolute desolation. In the command nook, Rook collapsed, blood streaming from his nose, the world dissolving into gray static. The last thing he saw was the frozen officer's face, and for a hallucinatory second, he thought he saw a tear of ice trace a path down its leathery cheek. The barbaric yawp had been sounded, not a cry of joy, but of shared cosmic grief. Now they all remembered.